Awesome. Thanks a lot, Ray, for coming on the Radical Fabulatorium. I appreciate you giving me some of your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's good to be back here in the station. It's been a while for me personally, so it's good to kind of tap into some old memories here at Local FM.
Because you used to host a show here, right?
I used to host a show here, a couple shows here, and I was the music director for probably a few years anyway.
Okay.
Just after I finished going to school here at UMBSJ. So I spent some time here and it had a lot of fun, a lot of good memories.
Yeah, a little blast from the past coming in here. A lot of people told me it hasn't changed much since I've only been working here for a couple of years. So
yeah, well, it's small and it's cozy and there's kind of music everywhere and it's it hasn't changed a whole lot, but lots of good memories, as I said. So it's cool to kind of come in here and be surrounded by all kinds of great posters and CDs and vinyl and all the other kind of things that, kind of make you think of all the great music that's come through here.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm a CD guy. Like I grew up with CDs. And so when I go to like Second Spin nowadays and even Backstreet more, like their CD collection shrunk or their CD selection shrunk. Yeah. And now it seems to be growing again.
Oh, for sure.
So for me, I'm like, yes.
what goes around comes around, and I think it's a generational thing. And nice thing about it a little bit is that it seems as though there's a bit of a more interest in like the tactile aspects of music. You think about it, the whole industry is a lot more healthy when people are buying physical media, and when you can go into a record store and I mean, vinyl is seeing a resurgence, continued growth, and more interest in CDs is a bit of almost like, I hate to say it because I'm a CD guy too, but it's almost like a retro thing for kids. Yeah. But it's good, the more people buying music, the more dollars there are that are kind of going through the industry. So that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I just got the new Propaganda record on CD. So I was happy that like old punk bands like that still, I mean, I guess they came from the CD era too, but
oh, for sure.
They're still pressing them, they're still putting them out there.
They're still pressing them. And every once in a while, like, I forget who it was last year came through. Oh, you know who it was? It was, we were talking to some friends in the Monoxides, cool. Or a great New Brunswick band that we've had in a couple times. And Ken slipped me a cassette. And I was like, damn, like there's nothing cooler than that.
Yeah,
And
here's a cassette.
Yeah, here's a cassette. And they're on the CDs, they're on the vinyl, they're on the cassette, whatever it takes. Next thing you know, bands will be coming through with 8 tracks. So I'll have to figure out what an 8-track player
wax cylinders
looks like. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah.
People should check out the Monoxide story, really. I mean, they toured with ZZ Top in the 90s. They kind of had a sick record deal at the time. They put out a great record. And like, it's such a cool story for a band from New Brunswick,
It's incredible, and even broader to think about what was happening in the Maritimes and that time frame, call it like early mid-90s. And whether it's the Monoxides, whether it's Eric's Trip, like there's just so much, so many great stories there of bands from here doing great things. And like sometimes those stories get lost around what's possible. It doesn't really matter what corner of the world you're from. You catch a little bit of a wind of something. At the time, it was kind of like Seattle North, Sloan and Thrush Hermit and like all this stuff, but that spilled over. Jail, all those bands. And, you think about Eric's Trip and Monoxides, and here you are, what is it, 40 years later, 35 years later, and they're still doing stuff, and that's a great story. And to be honest with you, it's one of those ones that we like to tap into, like through an Area 506 perspective, is that, it's kind of like, how big can we get? How big of a deal can it be to be from New Brunswick or to do something in New Brunswick? And we point to some of those stories. And one of the first things we did, 2016 was our first festival year. And and we used to bring in a whole bunch of shipping containers and try to create like a bit of a festival space. It's like a pop-up thing just for the weekend. One of the first things that we did is because we wanted to sort of figure out a unique way to kind of point out things of New Brunswick. And we made these like street signs. And, it was like Fiddlehead Way and it was Lower Cove Loop. And Eric's Trip was one of them as a street sign. And I just thought that's a really cool name for a street. And it's going to be a bit of a nod. But it's one of those things where, I wish that there was more stories like that coming out in New Brunswick. And there's a lot of great things happening right now. And, like we like to think we're as involved as what we can be in creating opportunities for New Brunswick-based artists. But when you think back at stories like that, it might have been a while ago now, but it's incredible to think of just how far New Brunswick acts have gone on the international stage. Even today, you know, Matt Anderson featured as one of the, forget exactly, I'll paraphrase, but Rolling Stone said he was one of the best blues guitarists in the world, or like a little bit of a, you know, a findable nugget, or, you know, whatever it was. Yeah. But to think of, you know, Matt from Pictou County.
Yeah, I think Perth Andover, maybe.
Perth Andover,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Perth Andover. But yeah, like, it's stories like that, you know, I think really put wind in the sails to kind of further kind of push this idea that there's great things happening in New Brunswick. Absolutely.
And just to throw back to Eric's trip too, like I think it was Julie Doiron, who's the bass player in Eric's trip. She just recently had like a Billboard charting tune that was featured in either a TikTok or like a Netflix something or other. Yeah. So she just got her first chart position like a couple weeks ago or something crazy.
It's incredible how these things happen, and how, you know, social platforms like that sort of bring things back, or they sort of like just put a little bit of wind into interesting things. But it's funny because even I think a couple of weeks ago I was in Halifax to see Stars, and Julie was asked to open, and the biggest reaction that she got of that set was that song that, you know, is like been a big deal as of late, you know. So it's amazing how sort of like things come around that way, and
that's really cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Cool. So like the reason I wanted to reach out to you, because it's like the 10th anniversary or 10th festival year, right?
Right.
For Area 506. But if I could just briefly, just for my own self-satisfaction, really, you mentioned about how the industry is healthier when people are buying tactile music. I wouldn't mind just following that thread just a little bit. Why do you think that is? Why do you think? What's the connection there?
Well, I think that, you know, like the more opportunities that people have to spend money. And, you know, if I was to think about what the revenue streams of today's artists look like versus what they would have looked like, whatever, 20, 30, 50, 60 years ago, they're very different. So it feels as though most musicians these days need to really, really hammer it out for every dollar, which is we're on the road all the time.
Okay.
We're selling the merch all the time. We're trying to figure out creative ways to get our brands into different places. We're working sync deals. We're trying all these kind of things that feel like it's, you know, an awful lot of work. If I was to think back 30 years ago, if you've got sort of a super healthy physical media channel where you're, and I mean, everybody does better just because every fan of your music is spending $20. It's just a different scale. So I think at the end of the day, it's like, you know, streaming is fine, but you talk to a musician and how happy are they with Spotify? Like, not very. I think that they do well through a lot of the larger labels, and that relationship is probably healthy, but how those dollars trickle down to musicians isn't nearly as healthy as what it could be if people were walking into places or walking out with, you know, like have a CD collection that you and I would have had 20 years ago on our wall. Those don't exist with kids anymore. So they spend their $12-15 a month, and that's what it is. They've got access to all the music in the world, and there's some pros to that, obviously. You know, like access is great, but when I think about how that money can kind of get back to develop artists and to keep artists healthy and that they can make a living, it's tougher than it used to be, you know. And I think that that's just that there's less money in the market and less opportunity for kids to walk in, you know, like they used to, and spend $20-40 a week on physical music, and then they're talking to each other and all the things. It's just, there just isn't that money coming back into the market and going back to artists. So I think it's as simple as that, where it just feels like it's a lot tougher for artists to make a dollar and make a living now because there isn't a physical media that people can buy. Or there is, just there's no need for it.
Yeah, there's no need for it. And like seeing it from a fan perspective, do you think maybe it's like robbing people of like core memories, where like maybe you're moving away from home and you're not taking your milk crate full of CDs anymore, which like has been an important part of your life. You're just bringing your streaming phone, and so you don't really have these memories attached to specific artists because you have it's like the paradox of choice. You have so much to choose from.
Yeah, and I think it's all like through the context of, you know, what generation you're part of and what your memories are, and kind of how, and I would be in the same boat as you, where, when I think about a road trip, and I, like as a young person, I'm old now, but when I was a young person, it's like you're picking what CDs to put in the visor case.
The visor case.
I've got 12 spots.
Yeah.
And what is it going to be? And my buddy's going to have 12 spots. And now we're going to compare notes on what we picked. And now we're going to kind of like, have some fun playing something new for somebody.
Yeah.
And that's a whole experience. Like to your point, that's about making memories. Or, go back and I'd speak to like my father about bringing a stack of records over to his friend's house and spreading them out and liner notes and all the things. That's an experience. And I think that that's a cool thing. I think maybe it sounds foreign to somebody who's 18 years old right now, or 15 years old in a high school. It's just not how they experience music anymore. So to me, I mean, robbing memories, sure, but that comes from a place of compared to what my, what my idea of making memories would be. So it's just different, I think. And at the end of the day, do I think that what goes around comes around? Will there be another something that comes up that, the industry sort of finds a way to make physical experience part of the music experience? Maybe, and I hope so, for the strength of the whole business and to make it easier for artists to make a living. But, who knows? I've got kids in high school now, and I mean, the way that they experience music is through TikTok at 15 seconds a pop, and they're kind of, it's connected to different things, and those are maybe pieces of content that are shareable, and that is kind of how they experience music. It's part of a broader, media. But like I said, it's just different. Kids aren't getting together on Friday nights and swapping CDs and doing that, and that's fine. I think we just got to come to grips with that. But I'm sure there'll be something else that comes around.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, you don't want to fall into that old man yelling at cliche.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But thanks for indulging that. I like thinking about that sort of stuff. And that, just as you mentioned, the TikTok 15-second song thing is like it brought back a memory of this old band called The Locust, which is like this kind of hardcore. Really hardcore, just weird band, and they would write like 15 to 45 second like songs that are just incredibly aggressive, kind of like Agoraphobic Nosebleed was another band like that.
Okay.
And my buddy would listen to them, and I'm like, who's going to listen to a CD with 62 songs that are 15 seconds long? And now it's like, man, if they were coming out today, they'd probably be huge.
That's the thing. Yeah, they were
ahead of the
before their time.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's circle back to Area 506, because that's, like I said, the 10th festival year, right? This year.
That's right.
So that's huge. Congrats on that.
Thank
Double
you.
digits.
Yeah.
I might have mentioned this to you before, but I feel like I was walking through Uptown St. John once, and I heard you giving an interview to CBC, like before the first festival even happened.
Okay.
Outside of maybe Picaroons, or where Picaroons now is.
Okay.
And I remember thinking, like, this guy's talking about bringing some sort of festival here? How's that going to work? It's St. John or whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is that a real memory, or?
I think I know exactly what you're talking about, only because there was some photography that was done around then.
Okay.
It was Julia Wright, who was interviewing me at the time, and I think Harry from CBC was down there going to do a news broadcast for whatever the CBC afternoon news was that day. It was a big deal at the time, and still kind of continues to be. They're a great support. Media is a great supporter. We sort of need traditional radio and terrestrial radio and sort of traditional media to kind of support us on those kind of things. But I do remember that. And, I think one of the things that sort of came through at the time is like, what are you doing?
Like, it seemed risky.
It did seem risky. It was, it was very risky. Yeah. But that was also sort of like the genesis of the whole thing, was kind of like, we deserve more, and the 506 story kind of starts from, it's a small group of us that walked away. In my past professional life, I used to work at Moosehead Brewery, and we used to look at different opportunities for, sponsorship and connecting to events around the province, and Harvest Jazz and Blues at the time. Harvest Music Festival was one that I wanted really badly. And I told myself that I wasn't going to attend until we could secure that relationship. And finally, we got to secure that relationship. And I remember coming away from Fredericton for the first time after enjoying the Harvest Jazz and Blues Festival at the time, and thinking, that's not what I thought Fredericton was all about. that's way better than what I thought Fredericton was all about.
It changed your perspective on the city?
It changed my perspective on the city. And that was the biggest insight that I walked away from, is to say a great event that is sort of tied into the identity of the city can change people's perspective on where they live, why they visit, tourism, pride of place, all these things. So coming away from that, there's a small group of us that kind of got together and said, like, why not us? At the time, there wasn't really a marquee festival in St. John. Festival by the Sea had sort of finished its run. It ran for 20 amazing years, which a lot of people forget about. But there was a gap, and we sort of looked at that and said, what is it that what could we do that's that's special, that's unique to St. John, that sort of we could all get excited about, and came up with the idea of Area 506, which is music, culture, goods, best in New Brunswick Day celebration. I thought of that weekend as, I'd ask people, what do you think of the New Brunswick Day long weekend? They say, is that the long weekend in August? You define it as the long weekend in August. It's like, that's the weekend that I go to PEI to camp. What? Yeah. How do you celebrate your province by going to some other province to camp, Mm-hmm. So it all seemed like a great opportunity for us to kind of like wrap our arms around that idea and put something together to say, let's put St. John on the map, let's do something, and let's get our shoulders back and sort of like really take a big swing. And we started to talk to some potential partners and put together a bit of a committee, and there was an interest, across a lot of great folks. Envision St. John at the time was Discover St. John, has been a great champion for us. Have really kind of like helped get us started. Straight up, wouldn't have happened the first year if it wasn't for them believing in the opportunity of kind of having faith in me, honestly, too. So that was incredible. But, at the end of the day, it was just like, yeah, it's a risk. But I mean, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it, and group today is very similar to what it was 10 years ago. And just about everybody around the room, like, isn't in it to do stuff that's easy. We'll kind of like roll up our sleeves, get the job done, and hopefully create something that has impact. And it's not just about putting on a rock show. It's about creating a sense of community and making people think differently about the city of St. John and what it is to live in a port city, even. How the ideas evolved over time is, we do different events now. We created the Waterfront Container Village, which is like an extension of that sort of port city container thing. 35 businesses now set up shop there. We do, 100 days of shows, over 155 days that we're open. So we do an awful lot of stuff. And I think it's just over time, you can build that through like a strong belief in what you're doing and how it sort of should matter to people. At the end of the day, if we matter to people, then we'll stay motivated. We'll keep doing the things that we're doing. Once it doesn't seem to matter to people so much, then maybe, the job starts to feel done. And, we're still going strong now and continue to build. But, when we think back to 2016, yeah, it was a big risk. Yeah, it was a lot of people scratching their heads. But in 2021, when I announced the Container Village, nobody knew what I was talking about then, too.
Now it's a staple.
Now,
it feels like it to me.
It's one of those things where sometimes it's a good sign to me when there's a lot of people sort of questioning, like, what are you talking about? Because then I get a sense of, okay, well, maybe we're onto something, a new idea, something that's unique and something that can be differentiated. And maybe it's a good thing that people don't fully understand it. So then when it happens, there isn't so much of an expectation. So it allows you to blow those expectations out of the water. So I'd have comments from, people of significance around the city, political significance, that are like, you can't be having a yard sale type thing on the waterfront. Like, I hope you know what you're doing. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. We're gonna put together something that's super cool, and like, just hold my beer. We're gonna make something cool happen. And so every time we get that sense of uncertainty or we're kind of feeling like a little bit at risk, it's not a bad thing, because I think in order to sort of make change and do something different, you got to sort of feel like you're on edge a little bit, taking a little bit of a risk. So didn't bother us then, doesn't bother us now.
It's a very punk rock approach. Is punk rock in your bones? Do you come from a punk rock background?
Yeah, well, yeah, it is. I'll be honest with you. I was having a conversation around this the other day. SNFU is one of my favorite bands of all time.
Yeah.
And one of my best memories from here, from this station, is when they played downstairs at the cafeteria.
Yeah.
And they were up, and there was a guy who was like an older brother of a friend at the time who did the interview. And I thought it was the coolest thing that I would ever love to be a part of. At the time, I was too young. I was here for the show, but wasn't cool enough to like walk into the radio station and interview Chai, so that's not happening. But, it's part of the bones. I don't know, it's probably my favorite style.
Cool.
But at the same time too, like try to keep things as wide open as I can. But, sometimes I think if you want to make change, you got to sort of like break some eggs sometimes.
Sure.
So you want to call that punk rock? We'll call that punk rock. But yeah.
That's very cool. I call it punk rock. I mean, even we'll go back to the first show too, like, because I know it's important to celebrate New Brunswick, celebrate St. John, because it's probably kind of a cliche that St. John in particular, but New Brunswick in general, doesn't really celebrate itself so much, or maybe we're a little like cynical and quiet, humble. Yeah. There we go. And but even from the first festival, you had like a New Brunswick Day with I think Matt Anderson, right? Oddly enough, we were just talking about him.
Yeah, the first festival.
Yeah. There was like a New Brunswick Showcase Day, and then another day with
that's a great memory.
Right?
That's exactly what it was. Yeah. So Matt Anderson headlined our that was the format. It was a 2-day event at the time. Matt Anderson headlined the first day. 55 was on that bill. You're going to put me on the spot. Yeah, but it was lots of great New Brunswick. Chris Colpaw.
Yeah, Chris Colpaw and the Cosmic Crew.
But that's what it was. And then the second day was more of a kind of a broader showcase. We had July Talk in. Nobody knew who they were.
Yeah, they were kind of
blew unknown at time, right?
Away. Yeah. Winter Sleep, I think, was there.
Winter Sleep was on the bill. Grace Potter headlined that second night. Big Sugar, who we've got again this year as part of our Boxcar Festival. So it's a bit of a return to form there, but yeah, it was a great lineup. And I mean, we just put together a package that sort of set us up for success. Low barrier to entry, low ticket price, get as many people in the door, buy into the idea. It seemed to work.
And with D-Set 55, the Acadian connection or the francophone connection right out of the gates, you were kind of melding those worlds or bridging that gap between the Anglophone and the Francophone scene?
Yeah, and it's always been sort of an important part of the programming plan is to kind of work as, 506, we say it is music, culture, goods. Those are the 3 pillars from day one still to this day. Those are the pillars. And culture is like this idea that I don't think New Brunswick gets a fair shake when it comes to cultural diversity. I think if you were to ask somebody, I'd say outside of New Brunswick, but I'm going to even say inside of New Brunswick, rank the provinces in terms of diversity. New Brunswick does not generally score high. I thought that was a shame because, in my past life, I do a lot of tours around local festivals and things, and there's an incredible amount of diversity, whether that's like the uniqueness of bilingualism in the province, that's Indigenous communities. I think in the last 10 years, the idea of kind of newcomers and immigration and the diversity that brings to the whole province, especially here in St. John, it's incredibly diverse. We always thought that from a programming perspective, like we have a culture stage. That's where we sort of like put together as much of a melting pot of things as we can, but also on the big stage, having some band from New Brunswick within that francophone community is an important thing. So he said 55 kicked it off, but every year you go through the lineup, there'll always be a band that sort of has roots in and around that. Hotesse de l'Air, Les Païennes, Les Hey Baby, Lisa LeBlanc's played the concert series. We haven't had her on the festival lineup, which is an absolute shame so far, but it just gives us opportunity for maybe down the road. But something within that mix is super, super important to kind of make sure that it's clear that, it's an event that's kind of built for New Brunswickers from every corner of the province.
Yeah, that's great. I think this year Bay's playing.
Yep.
They're a great band.
Fantastic
great band.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, I can't wait to. And I'm not sure that they've played St. John, and if they have, I think that hopefully this opportunity will sort of like open up a whole new audience for them down here, because regardless of what their background or their language is, they're a fantastic band. It's a great show.
Good music's good music.
Yeah, that's it.
And I just know this from my other job there. There's a local young francophone 3-piece band called Écarlate.
Okay.
And they're heading over to Switzerland and touring France. Like they leave like next month or something. And they just put out a new record too called Coup de Soleil.
Okay.
So I'll just randomly drop them in as a suggestion for anyone listening. Yeah, it's a really nice sounding record. So.
No, it's fantastic. And there's so much great stuff within that world, and sometimes you almost have to go out and look for it. But at the end of the day, like that's kind of one of the blessings that we see kind of putting together the plan and connections around the province over the last 10 years that have sort of been developed, where we do have a pretty clear line of sight of what's going on and good kind of industry relationships and connections with groups like Music NB, et cetera, where you get exposed to a lot of great stuff and there's amazing talent. To be honest, it's, New Brunswick is important, but, we live in a place that's just a blip on the radar of the rest of the country and international, So when I think about local, New Brunswick obviously is very, very important to us too, but, knowing what's going on PEI and in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and the rest of Canada, that's important too, to kind of like, put us on a stage to say like this is an event and a festival that's built not just for New Brunswick but for a great reflection of talent right across Canada.
Is there some way to know how many people travel to St. John for the festival, like outside of the municipality,
the region?
Yeah.
There is. So we track all of that through postal codes of purchases of ticket attendees.
Okay.
So the sense that we would have is that it's probably about 45% of attendees.
That's faux pas, eh? Radio host forgets to turn his radio. It's
a great ringer song, no?
Who can it be? Yeah. It's all right, I'm going to leave that in just so everyone knows how unprofessional I am.
Yeah, well, it's sometimes it's nice for the audience to see it being a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, so are we talking about postal codes? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. It's, we would say that it's about 45% of our attendees for the festival that would be outside of the region.
Okay, that seems pretty solid.
And about 30% come outside of the province.
Wow, yeah.
Most years it differs a little bit, but most years we have representation from just about every province. I think generally it's anywhere from like 11 to 14 U.S. states. There's always a few kind of randos from different countries and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, no, people come from all over. And, obviously for us, like we see it as a great tourism opportunity to showcase the city and the region. So people coming in and, eating in the restaurants and staying at the hotels and contributing to the economy. That's all good. It's part of it too.
That kind of lifts up the whole community, obviously the hotels, the revenue for restaurant visits and all that stuff.
That's it, and it's one of those things. It's kind of a broader approach, but when you think about, the importance of economic development and understanding the impact of events, they have a huge impact on the local economy and small business. So if you can, get 500, 1,000, 2,000 people into the city that wouldn't have come here otherwise, they fall in love with the food and the architecture and the people and the events. And now all of a sudden you can count them in to come back every summer, over the course of 5-10 years, whatever that is. There's a lot of value there, and we're of the mind where Area 506 is one thing, Boxcar Country Festival, Container Village, different thing. We'll do our stuff, but there could be 10, 15, 20 more things, and there should be. And rising tide floats all boats. Having something going on in the city every single weekend has got to be the goal, to get into the culture and into the bones of either local people as well as people that are open to coming here to visit, to say, I can take a risk on just heading down to St. John for the weekend. There's always something going on. And I think that's a long-term play, but over time, like we want to get there and to be the thing where, there's always something cool going on down there. There's something you want to check out, and you can kind of make a risk. If it's going to be nice on the weekend, we're going to come down from Moncton for the weekend, spend a few days in St. John and see what's going on. And you got a pretty good chance that you can check out a great show at the Imperial Theater, or, I'm going to hit the restaurants on the boardwalk, do the Container Village, whatever. There's always stuff to do.
That reminds me of when I was working a different day job at the time, and we were all kind of sitting around in the break room talking about like going out and about or taking in shows or going to restaurants. And everyone started to just kind of like, and we were job based in St. John here, and everyone started to compare and talk about how they used to road trip to Fredericton or they go see shows in Moncton. And then like it slowly but surely dawned on everyone. And I think it was my buddy Adam who said, I think St. John's got the best downtown in the province now. It's like everybody this was probably like 2019 or 2020 or something.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, like I worked in Moncton for about 4.5 years, around that same time. And it was enlightening for me because between the connections that I had in Moncton and then I was doing a bunch of work in Halifax, even with people who didn't know my connection to what I do in St. John and like what that piece of business was, I would hear about St. John being the envy of the Maritimes from people in Halifax and people in Moncton, which, you know, sort of made me think a little bit differently around the city and sort of honestly gave a little bit of confidence to be like, okay, shit's working. We're sort of on the right track here. And I think if you were to poll anybody in the Maritimes, even now, St. John's right up there in terms of the food scene. They love the architecture. People are super nice. And the thing that I don't know if a lot of people articulate it, but this is how I've sort of like thought about it myself. There isn't a city in the Maritimes that's got soul like St. John has soul. And there's a lot of things to do in other cities in the Maritimes, but there's a character and a soul to the city of St. John that I don't think really exists anywhere else in the Maritimes, which is special. And so I think, you know, the more that we sort of wrap our arms around that and start to understand that there's a lot of great things happening here, a lot of reasons for people to visit, hopefully gives people confidence to start to put together events and things and start new businesses and pop up a restaurant, do a whatever, you know, and yeah, it sort of feels like we got a little bit of swagger these days, which is good.
Yeah. That's a kind of must feel a little bit rewarding after putting so much effort and time into it. So.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, it's peaks and valleys, you know, and, you know, have the good years and the not so good years. But I think at the end of the day, we also sort of need to stick it out and stay kind of committed to the broad strokes objective, which is like over time, and it takes time. You just sort of want to make it a cooler, interesting place, you know? And so if we play a small part in that, then that's great. But like I said, that stuff takes time. So you got to sort of like commit to it and, you know, take the bumps when they come, but also sort of enjoy the successes too.
I'd like to think, so as a music scene lover and been involved in a while, like I noticed that it's like reliably you have local bands like opening the festival days.
Yeah.
But I don't know if everyone out there who just sees the names on the posters or whatever would realize that's really the case. Like when you see someone like Ermine or Tooth and the Fang, or like that's so, to me, that was like such an important part of what Area 506 was doing, the commitment to having 2 or 3 local acts open every day, basically. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you're a local scene music lover, but what kind of inspired that, or what, because that's kind of risky too sometimes, is like local bands, I don't know what the right way to put it. I mean, it probably helps local bands up their game when they realize they're going to be sharing the stage with like Alexis on Fire.
Yeah.
Like how does that come into the plans?
Well, there's a couple things like, you know, the strategy around the programming in general is defined. Like we have a pretty good sense of what's the percentage of New Brunswick based acts that we want to have as part of the overall mix. What's the percentage of St. John based acts that we want to be overall part of the overall mix. And that's not to say that we're steadfast in that. There's always kind of times when it's a little more, a little less based on what else is going on. But like we go into the planning phase saying like that's roughly. So if there's 21 bands that are going to be part of the mix over 3 days, there's so many bands that we want to identify from St. John. There's so many bands that we want to identify from New Brunswick. There's different checkboxes across different genres, you know, demographics, different things that we like to kind of consciously think through as many pieces as we can. Female content, solo versus group bands, where in the province they're from, when was the last time we had a band from Northwest New Brunswick? So like we consciously try to think through those things. The second piece is like, I think that there's limited opportunities for local bands to get on a stage in front of an Alexis on Fire or a Billy Talon or an Interpol. And so, you know, if it offers the opportunity for 2 or 3 bands to forever say that I opened for Interpol, that's a cool thing.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's a good opportunity. So, you know, like we sort of understand the festival model and like what sells tickets and what we need to do to bring, you know, 3,000-4,000 people in for a show. And if we can kind of leverage that, which is, you know, like you got to put power on the stage. You've got to make sure that your headliner can deliver and sell those tickets. But if one of the sort of peripheral benefits of that is that now you've got, you know, it might be an opening slot. So maybe it's 800, 1,000, 1,500 people. But if you can create an opportunity for that many people to see a local act, and then next time they see them on a poster and they're playing at Wasted Day or Haven Music Hall or, you know, Foghorn Brewing, then okay, they've got more fans. Like they're going to pack in another 30, 40 people into that show, and hopefully it gives them some confidence, gives them good awareness. It's healthy for the local music industry. It sort of, you know, it hopefully sort of helps propagate that and even give young musicians a sense that there's something to work toward. So last year we offered an opening spot to the Interaction Music School group. Cool. That was kind of like, okay, when else are you going to sort of get on a stage of that size? And so they ran a little bit of a thing internally to figure out kind of what's the act that's going to take the stage for that. We, just because this is kind of fresh in my mind, the other night I went to the KV High School Battle of the Bands, which is probably the most inspirational night I've had all year. It was amazing. Cool. So they had 8 local bands from 3 different high schools, and the winner, we offered them a spot on our Canada Day stage this year, and that seemed to be as exciting to them as the free bass that they got to put on display at their school for the next year until next year's Battle of the Bands. So just giving them those opportunities to get up on the stage is cool. I think anything we can do to get 16, 17-year-old kids picking up a guitar, getting excited about it, thinking that there could be a future in music, like giddy up, you know, all day long. So we'll show up to those things all the time. We'll try to figure out ways to, you know, extend opportunities whenever we can, whether it's through the Container Village, whether it's through, you know, the festival properties. But I think, you know, the bottom line is the more opportunities that local bands are given to play on a big stage, keep them sort of coming back. We'll keep them getting together every week in the basement or mom's garage or whatever it is to tune their craft. And like, the more of that happening, the better. The more music that's being played in New Brunswick by young people, the better. And if we can, you know, contribute to that a little bit by giving them a sense that there's a spot waiting for them for when they're ready, all day long.
Something to aspire to. Yeah. They might be thinking a couple more years and we'll be on this Area 506 opening for whoever.
For whoever.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think when I was first getting into music, like I bought a bass guitar through the local music store because I was listening to like music on the radio, Much Music and stuff. Yeah. But then I started playing bass for a little while, and then all of a sudden I just went to some random show at Jubilee Hall in Sussex, New Brunswick, and then it just like flipped a switch being like, oh, there's band. Like I didn't know what a local band was. Yeah. Like, there's bands here. Like there's people playing music here. Like it's not just Limp Bizkit and Korn and Incubus on Much Music, you know?
On Much Music, yeah. And I think sometimes like kids consciously need to be shown that. And unless you're in that very small group, it happens outside of, you know, most kids even knowing about it. And I remember a similar story, like I'll be dating myself a little bit, but high school, it was the same thing. All I knew was stuff that was super popular at the time. And then somebody drugged me to a show at the local that was put on by a high school kid in town who put on the show. And even today I'm thinking about that, like, that is impressive, you know? And yeah, there'd be a couple bands that'd be coming through, but 2 or 3 brands that are going to open. And to this day, like, I still think about some of those local bands as like, I've got a neighbor across the street from me who played in NYD, and to this day when we bump into each other, like I still have the t-shirt, you know. Awesome. And it's like it's one of those things where it's a super cool thing, and the more kids that sort of see it as part of their world going through high school, I think it just sets it sets more people up to kind of like be involved and understand that it can be a local thing. It can be a thing that can happen in your basement or your garage or your backyard, or, you know, at the local Legion, you know, when somebody rents out whatever on a Saturday afternoon for an all ages show.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And NYD, Not Yet Dead, right? We'll throw them in. They were at the first show I ever saw, actually.
Oh, there you go. And small world.
I'd encourage everyone, now this is kind of biased because I'm like connected to it, but I would encourage everyone to YouTube or search for Alexa on Fire playing in Sussex in 2003. There's a YouTube video of them playing Jubilee Hall. And it's just a tiny venue, you know, with like 100 people. And this is way before they kind of took, right as they were taking off. So to me, I've had people actually come up to me saying that's inspiring, seeing a band like that in this hilarious little bad sounding venue. And now all of a sudden, like 20 years later, they're
just massive,
very successful. Yeah.
Well, everybody starts somewhere. Right?
Exactly. Everyone starts somewhere. So yeah, that's inspiring. I like hearing that, giving so many local bands a solid chance. So
that's really great. It's a big part of what we do.
What, I'm kind of curious about like tickets. So ticket sales are important, obviously. And there must be a moment where like a show realizes they haven't sold enough tickets. So maybe you have to cancel the show. That's not really what I want to talk about. I'm kind of like, how do you build excitement for ticket sales to get enough pre-sale tickets to kind of like feel confident that it's going to go forward and be financially like, I don't know if successful is the right word. Like, how do you?
It's the $1 million question.
Okay, it's a tough one.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that there's kind of a specific kind of like silver bullet answer to that. You know, I think at the end of the day, like there's strategies that one can employ around, launch strategy, getting people excited about a thing, creating anticipation, depending on the lineup dynamic, how you launch a lineup, whether it's headliners first, all of the headliners, everything in one shot, leaking things out to sort of give yourself like some pulsed excitement as you kind of like go through the process. There's lots of different ways to do it. Early bird pricing, bundling, all these things sort of like play into it. It's basically the marketing of, pricing, ticketing, combinations, there's a lot to that. There isn't really a specific kind of answer that you can say, this is kind of what you need to do. I think the genesis of your question is like, at what point do you start to get comfortable that you've got a success on your hands? And the answer to that question, unfortunately, is never. It's, we've often kind of like complained, it's a last minute town. But guess what? I talked to somebody in Fredericton. Fredericton's a last minute town. I talked to somebody in Quebec City. Quebec City's a last minute town. Guess what? Toronto's a last minute town. So is Calgary. So is New York City and LA.
Okay.
So, I think, more often than not, it's about sort of creating a sense of urgency and anticipation where it's like, I need to be involved in this and I need to have a sense that if I don't act now, I might not get the opportunity. Sometimes that applies to some of the things that we do. So if we have a larger act performing in a smaller space, like our container village, and people know that's, a relatively small capacity, well, maybe that gives them a sense to say, okay, shows have sold out there, so I need to act now to guarantee my spot for HUP, for Classified, for the Trues, whatever. Festivals, a little bit of a different story where, like there's some strategy around tiered pricing, so act soon, save money. Different sections within a concert site sort of applies to events that would be larger for the most part than what Area 506 would be. But if there's 3-4 kind of different sections where you need to act quick to sort of get access to that section, it's closer to the stage. Like there's things that you can do between, site design, ticketing tiers, pricing to kind of, make it so that you're encouraging people that they need to act before Friday. And so to me, like I'm a believer the world revolves around incentivization, which means you need to give them a reason to pull the trigger. And it needs to be immediate and it needs to sort of like be very much top of mind. And if you can get there, then you can start to see some action. If you leave it too open-ended and you allow people flexibility, more time to think, basically everybody will leave things to the last minute. In our case, this part of the world, I wish it was Santa Monica, but the weather is not Santa Monica. It's one of those things where the element of risk and the element of weather really plays into, do you do 25% of your overall revenue in the last 2 days, or do you do 2% of your overall revenue in the last 2 days? People have just decided not to commit because the weather's not looking good. So you need to avoid that as best you can. And so it's not an easy thing to kind of figure out. And I've got more gray hairs than I would have liked because of that, thing specifically. So, there's things that you can kind of think through and that you learn over time and you try to figure out to the best of your ability, but there's no secret sauce that kind of applies to everything. I think you just sort of have to understand, what it is that makes people tick and what, people are, interested in, how you get them interested, how you get them excited, how you, tap into groups of people. There's lots of stuff that, is can be thought through, but it's not easy. It's not easy. And like I said earlier, like if it was easy, nobody or everybody would do it.
Would do it, yeah.
Would do it.
So you're still waking up the day of any show being like, how many heads are coming through the gates?
I mean, like we're sort of we're a little bit beyond that, where we try to plan to say anything within the last call it the better part of the last week is gravy. Like we'll have a sense of roughly this is what we've done in past years, so this is probably what we can account for. But I mean, very very rarely would we ever cancel a show. It's a tough thing to kind of like work through, but at the end of the day, like it's a bad look. It creates a lot of complexity. Relationships within the industry are really, it's a small
world, right?
It's a small world.
Yeah, you start to realize that when you work in it.
Yeah. And I think you also have to realize that if you do 20 shows, 6 of them aren't going to work. And that's fair. That's okay. Yeah. You got to minimize that as best you can.
Hopefully it's not the first 6.
That's right. Yeah. Hopefully, yeah. But you know what? Oftentimes it is. Same with any business, like you're not going to see profit till 5 years. So festival, like you're probably not going to have 5 years worth of runway, but you can't expect to sort of like get in on something, knock it out of the park, and then in year 2 come back and knock it out of the park again. You got to be sort of mature about those things, and you got to understand that there's peaks and valleys, and there's different reasons why people want to attend things. And, sometimes, it's natural, I think, where you think the second time around is going to be even better. Well, you lose the novelty of it. So it's not always the case, and so, it's all stuff over time that you sort of like learn, and you try to mitigate your risk as best you can. It's not a guaranteed industry. It's not an industry that's sort of built for, people that aren't willing to take risks. But, over time, you start to get a handle on things, start to get used to things. Every once in a while, you're going to take a beating on something, and that's the way it is.
I really enjoy the habit, or the, what's the right word? The tradition that Area 506 has of releasing the band names one by one.
Yeah.
And I saw on a forum for this year, someone posted like, there was just a sentence, releasing the band names one by one is diabolical. I remember thinking, because I've been in the room that, like, I used to work at the pulp mill, and I've been on a night shift or a 12-hour shift where people are sitting there waiting on the release day, waiting for the hour to go by for the next band, and you got half the room hating it. Like, this is, I just want to know, and the other half is so excited, like, just watching their phones.
Yeah, it's
diabolical. Seems like
diabolical. I love it. I love it, and it is. So yeah, we've been doing it forever. It's kind of our thing. I think I feel it's like the event before the event, right? Mm-hmm. We call it the least productive day in St. John. So, and the idea that we can kind of spread it out over time, make people a little bit crazy, world runs on friction, you know, so it's good. It just sort of makes the whole thing come alive for a full day. And then, we don't make it too bad. So we'll put tickets on sale at 5:00 at the end of the day. We're not going to let them wait, like after that. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's probably got as many lovers as it has haters. Yeah. But to me, that's a good thing. So you're getting a reaction.
Yeah. That's funny. The least productive day in St. John.
Yeah, that's it.
That's accurate. I would say that's accurate from hands-on experience.
Yeah.
That's funny. So with the waterfront development, does that change the plan going forward with the new apartments going up and everything? Do you think about like the growth of that uptown area in a good or bad way? I mean, I'm sure there's pros and cons.
Yeah. We think about it a lot. I think almost exclusively it's a great thing. So we've got a great working relationship with Fundy Harbor Group. We've got a great working relationship with the Port of St. John, who's our landlord, for lack of a better term, and partner. So they've been a partner of ours right since day one. They've been great to work with. I don't think that it changes much in the immediate future, in that the parking lot space that opens up for the festival is kind of what's been earmarked for the festival. It doesn't really sort of infringe on the development of Fundy Quay. So the way that I look at Fundy Quay is over the next, whatever the timeline looks like, I think it's probably the next 8 years or so, those buildings will go up. And as they do, it's only going to bring more attention and people and energy to the uptown core. I think it's going to be a great addition. It's going to light the whole waterfront on fire. I think between the development at the new boardwalk, the Fundy Key project, the container village, there's new businesses popping up on the other side of Water Street to sort of develop that. I think that whole area, fast forward 8-10 years, is just going to be amazing. We're excited about it. Obviously it's one of the things a few years ago that we knew were in the plan, and, it was something that we wanted to be a part of. We thought that location, coupled with the relationship with the port and their commitment to, working with us to create something that's great for the community, which ended up being the container village. It gave us the ability to have the festival right on the waterfront, which I think is a great showcase for the city and the harbor and all the things. So I think it's almost exclusively positive and shouldn't really impact us in any negative way that I could foresee right now. Now, who knows what changes down the road and what we look to do with the festival in terms of size and scale as well, where it's a perfect space for, call it up to 4,000 people, which is generally what we would do on a super busy night of the festival. But if we were to make a decision to say, okay, we want to do something that's much bigger, maybe smaller, and maybe that sort of changes the water in the beans a little bit. But for now, just sort of feels like we're part of a group moving the right direction to sort of develop that part of the city. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to work well for everybody involved.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's exciting. I pretty much agree completely. Like, I think it's exciting. The more attention, the more people, the more businesses, the more places to live uptown is going to be great. And it's probably a great time to start looking at, like, maybe it's a little too early, but leases in New Brunswick Square, Marketplace have been a little like empty-ish, but with that boom, with that coming construction and everything uptown, I think it's going to be neat to see all the new businesses that open in there.
Oh, 100%.
The Right Cafe or the Right Cafe is a good example, really.
Fantastic. And I was in there a couple of weeks ago. They actually, Partridge Island Publishing was in the village as a vendor for the last 2 years.
Cool.
And to see a business like that move on, like a big piece of that model is of the vendor model for the container villages as an incubator and to give people a bit of a start and
without committing to
that's it.
Got it.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, you're in there for 5.5 months. It's weather-wise the best 5.5 months. You can capitalize on the tourists, the cruise traffic, all the things. It's a low risk kind of way of kind of like proving concept. And sometimes it works long-term for some partners. And sometimes it's a great sort of like, I just got to get my toe in the water a little bit, see how this is going to work. And, after being in the village for 2 years and to see what they've done with this amazing space in Market Square now, like I look at that and said, like, that's a great move. It's great for everybody all around. And it's kind of created this amazing little space that everybody should check out. But to your point, I think, rising tide floats all boats. The more things that are happening uptown means there's more people just coming in to check things out, hang out on the weekend, which creates opportunities for more businesses to hopefully move in and start to fill out Brunswick Square, Market Square, City Market, and even, storefronts around uptown in general. Just that's the play. Is to just get more people interested so that there's more businesses that are willing to take a risk and have a second look at St. John and start to make investments here.
Absolutely. And just thinking and introducing people to more local talent, knowing that there's a store selling local authors' books all over the wall, all over their walls is again, someone who's aspiring to write a book or even short stories might think they're the only one around trying to become an author, Well, that's just not the case. Yeah.
It's a great point. The other thing, and this is just a little bit of an anecdote. Last year, the Partridge Island Publishing folks had an event that we worked with them on some space in the village that was called Pitch the Publisher.
Oh, cool!
And it was basically exactly that, an opportunity for people to come with their book ideas to pitch as a concept. And the number of people that turned up to do it was amazing. And even just the concept of that's a thing. There is a publisher. There is somebody local who you can kind of start to work with, get some feedback from, try to figure that out. And back to the high level point, which is you can do anything here. And so it's you don't need to think about, moving on. If you want to be a writer, you've got to do it somewhere else. you can do stuff like that here. And I think the more that people get into that sort of way of thinking and have those opportunities be well marketed and in front of them, so that people that are working on book ideas or whatever, they've got that on the radar, that there's this cool little cafe that's filled with locally authored books. They can have a conversation with someone in there at any given time to get a sense of, what they need to do to get to the next step. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Okay, maybe we'll wrap it up with just a couple other quick little questions here.
Sure.
Now, you don't have to name names, of course, but I'm curious, has there ever been any sort of silly, outlandish rider requests? There must be something strange that's popped up.
There has been. Yeah, there has been. So better question for our amazing hospitality crew. Jeff and Cynthia Liberty kind of handle a lot of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And we'll get through some interesting ones here and there. The one that's most fresh is actually next week. I'm not sure when this runs, so I won't say a date, but this summer we've got Hallucination, which used to be a tribe called Red, coming in the Container Village. And on their rider is an 8x10 framed photo of Bret the Hitman Hart. And I'm not sure exactly why. And yeah, we will deliver on it, and we will kind of make that happen.
That's funny.
But yeah, it's one of those things where whenever I see something that's kind of silly and outlandish, it makes me wonder. I go back to the Van Halen in the 80s story of the brown M&Ms or whatever that story is, which is it's more so around trying to get people to see if they're paying attention to the details, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's not. But somehow in my heart, I'd love to think that they get down in front of that picture and just say a little prayer to Bret the Hitman Hart before they go on and perform.
The whole Hart family.
Yeah.
That's funny. Actually, I was just talking. I was speaking. I think it was James Mullinger who explained that to me. Stuff like that is in a rider to make sure people are paying attention, because there are safety concerns involved when you're performing and stuff. So they want to make sure the crew has read through the rider and taken the time to look at it.
Yeah.
Or they're just honoring the Hart family.
Well, I like to think that it's the latter, but yeah. No, that funny. Original story comes from this idea that Van Halen saw opportunity in playing smaller markets in the 80s.
Okay.
But their concern was, can the smaller markets deliver on the safety setups and all of the engineering stuff and all the whatever. So the idea being is that if we put a small detail into the bottom of a rider and they pick up on it, then we can be convinced that they're going to pick up on some of the other details about what it's going to take to create a smart, a safe environment. So
anyway, to feel good about it.
Yeah, there's a whole story there.
That's funny. Maybe we get to think briefly about the crew that runs the show behind the scenes, the comfort of the crew. I mean, they're under a lot of stress in the moment, of course. Mm-hmm. So how does as a festival organizer, how do you? And I shouldn't say I like to imagine, but I imagine sometimes the crew gets thought of last, the comfort of the crew.
Yeah.
Is that something that you have to consider or have considered when
you say crew, the crew that comes with the band?
Could be, I'm thinking more of the tech crew that's making sure the stage is good, the back, the green room is prepped properly, anyone who might be doing any of that stuff.
Yeah. So it's, it depends. We've got an amazing committee that comes together, works on the project all year long and oversee different parts of the whole experience. Hospitality and green room is something that we own, that the folks on the committee kind of run. So that's Jeff and Cynthia's world. They do an amazing job. Got bands coming back that, will come back almost exclusively for Cynthia's hummus, But when it comes to the stuff that needs to be done professionally and needs to be done really well, that's when we're leaning on partners that we know that can deliver. On the sound tech stage setup, we've had the same partner since day one. We work with Signature Sound, have right from the beginning. They do an amazing job. We've got all the confidence in the world. They're real pros. And, I think when it comes to certain parts of things, you need to kind of rely on expertise and have faith in those kind of relationships. And that's an example of one, when it comes to on-site electricians as another example. We don't mess around with that, want to work with the best. And then it goes to all of the services, work with JTR on all the the porta potties and sanitary stuff, they're the best. That's who we want to work with. And it's all part of the experience. It's like, you don't really think about it until it's something that you have to think about. And if you're working with good partners that take care of problems before they come problems, then it's just one less thing that I need to have. Shadow security is another one. So, we work with and ask for specific people to be in specific roles because we know over time they can do a great job of managing the pit or working the front gates. They're the people that, extend the experience of friendliness. They're giving high fives at the gate when people come in. It's so different than, you might go to another event and it's all business and it's like, over here, sir, I got to check your bag. Like it's like them understanding over time, like what it is to be part of the Area 506 family and what's the experience we want to convey and how can you be part of that? It just sort of adds to the overall vibe so that general consensus from people is like, what an amazing weekend. It's all I want them to think about. I don't want them thinking about the bathrooms were disgusting, that the beer was too expensive, that the security guard was like harsh. So all of that stuff, like I said, is just a matter of working with the right partners and putting the right team together just to make sure that, everybody's on the same boat, delivering the same message, and just makes for a great experience all around.
Very cool. Awesome. I think that's a great place to end the chat, Ray. Is there anything you want to quickly plug? I mean, obviously the festival's coming up New Brunswick Day weekend.
Yeah. So, Area 506 on the New Brunswick Day long weekend this year. We're excited about the lineup. Boxcar Country Festival is the week before, July 27, 28. We've also got kind of our full slate of waterfront concert series stuff being released now. The best place to get all those details is either our website at area506.ca or through our social channels. But generally speaking, what I put out there as a message is, especially when it comes to local residents of the city, is to kind of put yourself out there and to get out there and to support events. It's a difficult thing to get into. It's a specifically difficult thing to get into in St. John. And I think for a long time, people would be of the mind where they need to go somewhere else to do something, or there's not a whole lot to do. And now, whether it's at Area 506, it's at Imperial Theater, it's at Haven Music Hall, it's at Wasted Day, it's at wherever, there's lots of stuff to do. There's no excuses anymore. And I think at the end of the day, you get out, you enjoy some live music and socialize. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to make you a better person. It's going to make the next day seem brighter. And the more that we can get that message out there and get people getting out, enjoying their city, eating in the restaurants, doing the things, get up off the couch, enjoy life, enjoy some live music, and come and party with us down on the waterfront.
Cool. Very well said. Awesome. Thanks a lot for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate the chat. It's been great.